All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of the WP Crowd. Should be a good one, a little bit more intimate today with less people. We're actually missing a person for now, but I think she'll be joining us a little bit later. As usual, let's start with introductions. I'm going to start on my left with Jamie. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Jamie Schmid. I am web architect at Ohms Tech, which is a small agency based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But I live in Portland, Oregon, and I work mostly remotely. Um, I do a lot of architecture kind of stuff. I also do design and development. But my favorite is content related things. So this is a good topic.
Cool. And my next person, Kate. Go ahead and introduce yourself. And Kate has a really cool little course that she has going on right now. So why don't you tell us a little about that too?
Sure. I'm Kate Newbill. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and I am with Two Fish Web. If you are looking at the chat, Roy very kindly put my the link up there to my little tune-up course. And what I'm going to be doing, it's an email course to help you tune your website to increase your holiday sales. It's for people who have websites where they're selling something, whether they're art or t-shirts or whatever. And we're going to be covering a lot of things like how to take a look at your website and see what easy fixes you can make to increase your visibility. We're going to talk about ways to attract new customers and ways to delight the customers so that they'll come back to you and be raving fans from now on. It's an email course. You get one email a day with one action point. Some of them will lead to little videos that tell you a little bit more about what we're doing. But it's simple, easy. It's $15, and the link is on the chat.
Yeah, if you're joining us now or you are viewing afterwards after we're live, feel free to just go to our website, thewpcrowd.com. Just look for our latest podcast, which will be this one, or look for this podcast, and it'll be in the chat right there. So feel free to click on the link and sign up for her awesome course.
Thanks, Roy.
All right, today we're talking about content. Content is king, right? Content.
Right.
And I got a lot of questions actually talking about asking what we're going to be talking about. And a lot of people ask me if we're doing content marketing, like how to market your content and how to market your website based on the content. That's definitely going to be something we talk about, but not today. Today I wanted to focus more on starting out a project and taking what a client gives you as far as what kind of content they're going to have on the website and planning the website before you even touch code, before you touch a theme, before you even start WordPress. What are some things you can do to kind of help build? Because I'm a developer. I love doing the Leroy Jenkins. I love running into the code and just coding away all day. And then halfway through, I'm like, wait, I just coded all this, all these custom post types and all these taxonomies, but none of it makes sense for the actual content coming in because the client gives me a list, and I'm like, each one's a CPT, when really not all of them need to be, or some of them are more closely related, so it could be a little bit different. So, Jamie, this is something you talk a lot about during your WordCamp talks. So where do you start? Like, if you just got a scope of work and you know what the content's going to be, where do you start before you start building?
Well, I think first, what you really have to understand and address the issue is that your client is probably not a writer, and if they're, having a site for the first time, they probably aren't prepared for all this content that they're going to have to write. So when you, so I was a developer, and this is how I actually first got very interested in content strategy, because I would get instructions on what the content will be, and of course I've got from the designer Lorem Ipsum, and at the end of when we're entering in the content, which we typically left for the end, the content would be incomplete. It would be in complete, like, formatted Word documents, and you would notice that things wouldn't fit in how you originally had planned it. And now the client's confused, you're confused, you know, you've got tons of time already put into all these custom post types. And that's when I was like, okay, there has to be a solution to this. So I found Content Strategy, and it's really changed the way I've been able to develop websites as a developer. One of the things that I really like to do, which some people are on the fence about, but I kind of stand behind it, is coding up all of your content architecture first. And building your custom post types, your custom fields, everything, and then giving the client access, like doing a little miniature tutorial, giving the client access to like your dev site, right, or your staging site, and letting them enter in content, because now you're not going to have a bunch of different versions of the same Word document emailed to you. You know, they're saying, oh, that was on version 3 that I sent you, and you're like, I don't see it in my inbox. Or, you know, like, there's so many problems that can happen when you're getting content from different places. So that is one thing that I believe in a lot, and it can be hard to get used to and hard to, like, feel that you can give up, because, like, as developers, we want to have control over the whole site before the client can touch it. But I think that if you just give them access to entering their content, you're gonna pull out all the content issues first. They'll be like, but wait, I have all this other stuff. It doesn't fit into these fields. Then at that point, you haven't developed the entire site, so you can go and be like, oh, well, we can really easily change this, and that's not necessarily the case at the end. So that's one thing that I like to do.
How about you, Kate? You do a lot of client work. What kind of stuff do you do to client?
What I say quite frequently is I come into a site in the middle. The site is already there, it's already live, and they need some work to reorganize or optimize the website. I had one recently where it was a WooCommerce site. This is a little bit different than what we were talking about, because WooCommerce products, of course, are their own custom post type. But you have ways to organize the products in categories and with tags, and this thing was a total mess, and we had to go through and basically I had a lot of Postit notes. Here's this particular product, what group does it belong in? And I made a big whiteboard with Postit notes to get all my categories and tags put together. So that's kind of an old school way to do it, but it's a very visual way to do it. And it helps a lot with clients who are visual and don't understand how to arrange code the way that we see it. So, you know, I'm a big proponent of working it out on paper to start with.
Cool. I agree. I think I spend a lot of time planning out my content, especially with bigger builds and applications on paper. Shanta, did you just join us? Or not?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Why don't you spend like a quick minute here and just introduce yourself, since we already started?
Sorry for the delay, guys. Toronto traffic is terrible. My name is Shanta. I am from Toronto, Canada. I teach at a college in Oakville called Sheridan. And one of the biggest things that I teach is content architecture to our intermediate web design courses. I've spoken numerous times on the topic at various WordCamps, everything from WordCamp Milwaukee. I'm also, I've done it at Toronto a couple of times, Buffalo. And one of the reasons I'm running a bit late is because I'm going to Ann Arbor this weekend. So hopefully I'll see a few of my friends there. And the biggest thing that I believe in doing is using Postit notes. Just as you were saying, Postit notes are your friend. And the biggest principle, which I hope I can get into a little bit later, is the 3-5-7 rule, which is planning your architecture long before you even touch the WordPress dashboard.
So what is that? Like, I've seen your talk, and one of the things you do, I think, is you divvy up your content. Like you you separate it out really quickly. What are some of the separations? I think that's right. So what are some of the things that you do with the content? If you have, let's say you got a client who's giving you content, what are some ways that you can what are some ways you separate it so you know which one is what, post type, and creating new post type, stuff like that?
Well, I don't necessarily delve that far into it. What I usually deal with my clients on, and most of the clients that I deal with, are small businesses. They want to know how they can manage this themselves. So one of the things that I teach them is what the difference is between a page and a post. And that's one of the first lessons that I teach people. So I actually ran through this with my class just last week. And the way that I look at it is that the stuff that doesn't change on a daily basis, the things that you're not necessarily going to update or announce to the world, that aren't necessarily on a timeline, are more static pieces of information. Things like about us, things like contact us. If you add a new team member and you want to add something to the about us, yes, that's definitely something to rave about. But you're more than likely going to add a blog post where there's a timeline attached to it, where you say this person joined us on this day, but the actual page you may not necessarily draw attention to. So what I do with my clients is I get them to take these lovely handy Post-it notes, write everything down that they want to know or what topics they want to show on their website, and just get them to lay them out. Then we start worrying about whether there's categories, whether they're pages, whatever. But all I do is I get them to write them down on these lovely Post-it notes and just say, that is something I want to write about, or that is a category or a major piece of information. And we sort of take it right from the bare bones.
Awesome. So, Jamie, you touched on basically letting the client kind of have at it in the dashboard a little bit after you've done some of the planning. What are some things to help people, I guess, move along in that process? Like, do you actually wait for a client to be fully functional, ready to put in any type of content they have available, or do you start going ahead with the code, or when do you feel like is a good time to stop and say, okay, well, this is good, let me start coding now? Or do you wait for them to be fully, essentially, self-sufficient before you start?
Well, one of the things is it's not just me, but so there's sort of like a thought process of MVP, which is minimum viable, MVC, minimum viable content, and you can tell the client, like, okay, this might not be the very, very final content that you have, but we at least want to get it in there and have an understanding of what your intentions are for this section. So, I mean, if you're just doing blog posts, obviously that's all gonna that's not gonna probably be structured like, for example, like Shanta was saying, like a member section. So once we have an idea of what they want to put into every area, then we can start looking at, okay, do we need to, it's like an iterative process. It's like, do we need to change the way that this is going to be laid out, or this is going to be architected? And even just giving them access right in the well, not necessarily in the beginning, but they can have access to putting content in the database, and that is not going to affect how you're, creating the theme or working on development of the site, because really starting with real content is sort of like a developer's dream, and it's like a designer's dream, and it's everyone's dream. So anything you can do to facilitate that is only going to end up helping you. So I do it all at the same time, basically, if I can. If there's a content issue, keeping the dialogue open. If you see something broken on, can go back to the client and be like, hey, I noticed that this, we made space for like 40 lines and you have just like 3 words. Like, then you can be like, okay, maybe we're not really thinking this out properly. Or, because maybe instead of having a WYSIWYG field, maybe you're like, okay, we just need a text field there. So like, it kind of helps you do that, It's sort of iterative, so it helps you continue on and keep updating and getting your fields and everything the best that they can be.
Okay, so what about, let's talk about, for example, we're talking about small business clients. I deal a lot with larger business, so enterprise level. Specifically in the realm right now, a big topic that has come up a lot is we have a client, they're on a Drupal site, which is on Drupal 7. They have tons and tons and tons of content. They come to us and they're like, well, we can't use Drupal anymore. We don't want to use Drupal anymore. We want to move to WordPress. So we've talked about kind of the starting point, but let's talk about really quickly what you would do in a case where someone already has a bunch of content on a website. How do you take a website and how do you dissect it to be WordPressy, I guess is the term, or how do you go from a website that already has a bunch of content to basically, your WordPress build? Anyone feel free to answer that one.
Yeah, I can take that. So, sorry, Shanta, you want to?
Go ahead.
So one of the things that I mean, this does happen a lot. Like if you're these days, almost everybody has a website, so you're gonna usually be starting out with something. So one of the things that you start out with is a content inventory, where you literally make a spreadsheet of all the content that is in this site, or obviously if there's hundreds of posts that are in one area, you just show that type. But it basically lets you go through and get an idea of what you've all got. And then after that, you can start on your content audit, which is going through and being like, all right, what of this content do we even want to bring on? Like, what of it is old? What of it isn't in the right voice or tone? And once you have it pared down, then you can really start going through and figuring out what you want to push into WordPress. So.
Shanta, anything to add to that?
So, from a less technical perspective, what I would do is probably similar to exactly what Jamie was talking about. The difference is what I would do is I would still go through the exact same procedure that I've already done, whether we're doing a new site or whether we're doing an old site. The reason being is that sometimes those sites, as long as they've been around, when you go through a lifespan, even if it's 5 years, the topics that you were writing about 5 years ago may not be as prevalent or as, you've honed your craft after a while. So these are things that you may or may not still want to put forward in, especially if you're going through a redesign. So they are still valid to that person and they still need to be curated. But when we're talking about things like wayfinding and navigation, which is the methodology that I use, you don't necessarily want to put all of that stuff at the forefront. So what you want to do is bring to the front your navigation and everything else, things that you want your clients to see. What I mean by that is the visitors. So even if you've got all this wonderful content over the last 5 years, you still need to go through with your lovely Post-it notes and say, is this a topic I am still wanting to put at the forefront? Is this still something that my clients need to read about? And if it is, great. Then it becomes, and again, through this whole process that I go through, you add it to your navigation as well. So what I would end up doing is probably identifying what those major categories are still. Because many of the clients that I've dealt with, yes, they have those hundreds of thousands of posts, and 90% of them are still uncategorized. And it drives us nuts. So they still need to, like, this is a time for reflection. It really is. And so what you do is you still go through that same process. You go through and you say, these are the topics that I want to talk about. These are the things that I think my viewers or my readers need to know about. And those are the things that we are going to focus on. Anything else that is sort of in the background still needs to be curated and still needs to be categorized. But it just may not be right at the forefront of, of what it is that is going to show in your navigation ultimately. So it still needs to happen.
Cool. And so another question that was brought up was, do you manage the content? When's a good time? Like, so we say that content is, is ideal for, when you start development, maybe even before you do the design. What about types of content? So, when I think content, I think blog posts, pages. But what if your content's something completely different? Or what if how do you take into consideration things like an e-commerce store or things like that? Kate, you deal a lot with e-com stuff. I know that you've talked a few times about it. So how do you factor things like e-com and products and all that into, let's say, the bigger picture, which includes the blog and the pages and all that?
Right. There's two things. Let me address first the first part of your question. I work a lot with artists. And quite frequently what we'll do is set up a custom post type for paintings or for, and then categorize that. It may be art. It may not say paintings. If the particular artist does sculptures and beaded vessels or something like that, you'll have different categories within art. That needs to be a custom post type to make it easy for the client to put new content in later after we've got the site set up. This leads into e-commerce. If she is selling her art, then we need to work within the store to categorize things in a way that makes sense to a visitor. That's exactly what Shanta was saying. How is a visitor going to look for these particular products? How are they going to search for them? Let's say that I am looking for a painting that's this wide and this tall, and it needs to be predominantly blue. How am I going to find that? We need to think about the ways that visitors are going to search, as well as the way the artist herself is going to be putting products into her store. So that's a lot of different things that we're looking at as categories and tags, as well as custom post types when you're talking about e-commerce. Did that clarify, or did it confuse?
I think that, yeah, you did a good job.
Good.
It is. I mean, I think the whole thing is kind of confusing. Like sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around how to deal with the content, especially when you're dealing with a lot of it. It can get really overwhelming very quickly because when I'm looking as a developer, when I look at the design, it's very two-dimensional. It's very, this is the content, this is what's going online, and I'm going to create what I can with it. And that's why I kind of go gung-ho, and as I said before the show, I like to code before I even think. Like, I don't measure at all. I just code and then, half the time regret it later. So it's something I've been wanting to change, and I think content's definitely one of the first things that are key to that because, again, looking at a flat design where it's like each title is perfectly one full line and a paragraph is exactly 3 lines across all these boxes that are perfectly the same height. It's hard to get that, and it's not really real world. It's the designer's perfect world, and as much as we could kind of finagle it with the code, it's not necessarily always going to be that way. So content in general has always been, I don't know, it's not really the confusing thing. It's just this thing that can be overwhelming because there can be just so much of it. And when there's so much of it, it's like, okay, what's a post type? What's a taxonomy? And the problem is that the business, your client, doesn't always know. They just know, hey, I have all these documents, or hey, I have all these forms and stuff. And it's like content vomit onto your plate, and you have to somehow figure out how to take that and organize it, and that's really gross. But you have to make sense of it sometimes, and that's, for me, that can be kind of challenging. Because again, I don't deal with content all that much, but.
Well, if I could quickly jump in, so there is actually a process we call content modeling, and for any developers that are listening, or Roy, so it's like database modeling, right? So, but instead of creating a database, you're creating a content model. So there's actually a bunch of really good steps that you can go through when you have this content vomit, which, yeah, it happens, and it is not pretty. even just getting new content from clients, you get it in so many different formats, and who knows what the database looks like that you're starting out with. Kate, you were saying, like, it's everything is just dumped into one section, and you want it to be structured. So content modeling is really just a way of going through and kind of figuring out what your content types are. And it's a very structured process. I like structured processes. So basically, you go through, you discover and plan your metadata. You figure out your content types. You figure out your taxonomies, and it's all related, because you do this. You can do this beginning with what Shanta and Kate were saying with the Postit notes. What I do personally is I like to show clients mind maps. A mind map is basically a simple brainstorm that you do on paper that we did in school when we were kids. You just take everything. You can start from wherever. You can start. The sender can be the homepage. The sender can be website. But just encourage your client to just draw a circle and be like, okay, first I'm going to have a photo gallery. And then they're going to start noticing that, okay, what does the photo gallery need? Okay, well, the photo gallery, each one needs an image, and actually I want them to be able to click on it and see a much bigger image. I want a title for each image. I want maybe a link to something there. So like you already have 4 pieces branching off of that, and that's 4 bits of metadata that as the developer you can immediately look at that and be like, oh, okay, well, this is our content. This is easy enough to figure out to structure. But the nice thing about using the Postit notes and what makes them really valuable is you can move them around a lot, because that's the exact same thing when I'm doing a mind map. You realize that you want to have a couple pages on members, and you're like, okay, we have 3 members, so now you have 3 little points coming out for members, and you go over this the second time and you're like, oh, well, that can easily be a custom post type, or that can be a repeater. So you can go through, do it in pencil. You can, there's programs where you can use, but I find pencil the easiest. And you just rewrite it. You're just like, okay, no, this is a custom post type. It's not a deliverable. It can be hugely messy, and it usually is hugely messy. But that's basically how you can get started on the content modeling. And I have some references that I can show at the end to get people more involved with content modeling. But yeah, sorry, Shanta.
No, it's okay. I was just waiting for you to finish. That's cool. The one thing is that I find that most of my clients going to something like that, to them, looks like a technical document, and they hate it. So while, yes, that is important, I think that's still one further step down the road. Let me give you an example. This is what I handed to my students last week. Okay? These are the leftovers from the stacks of Post-it notes that I usually take to every talk that I do. This is actually what we did in the class. Like, we actually took an entire possible website, and all we did was wrote down what types, and we actually based it on a photography website. And by the way, if any of my students are watching, yes, it'll probably be on the exam. All you do is take things like, what kind of pieces are we going to look at? Okay, well, we're going to have photos on wildlife. Great. We're going to have them on nature, and more than likely, things like wildlife photos are going to go under something like nature. And so it's actually starting with the idea of these are all of the topics that you have, and then breaking them apart into those categories or pages. And then for me, I then put them into a navigation. The custom post types, yes, they are planned, but they are put into sort of a branch after the navigation is determined. So for me, it's not so much about the metadata right away. That usually comes later for me. It's like, okay, we have a picture of a maple leaf. Go Jays go. And then under that, we might have wildlife, right? So I usually literally take it like this and I put it on the big whiteboard above us. So for me, that becomes one of the easiest pieces long before we get into custom post types, before we get into types of metadata. Most of the clients that I'm dealing with are single person shops. They just want to sell their stuff. So yes, once we've done all of that, then we get into okay, what do I want it to do afterwards? What kinds of pieces do I need it to have? Is this a painting that's a 3x5, just like you said, Kate and Jamie?
Cool. Well, I think I got my head wrapped around content a little bit better, and I'll definitely be employing some of these techniques next time one of our Drupal and or new builds come my way, and the content is a little overwhelming. Jamie, if you can, just go to the wpcrowd.com, and if you can just share some links in the chat, that would be super helpful. So if anyone comes in afterwards, they can click on links and check out all the crazy things you were talking about, mind melds and all that.
It's not that scary, I promise. It's it's
so,
fun.
Yeah.
Nice placement there, Roy. Nice placement.
Yeah. Content just never seems fun to me. It's just coding seems fun.
It's not a sexy topic, Roy, and you know what? That's what I usually start my talks with. This is not a sexy topic, but trust me when I say, and I'm sure the other ladies will agree with me, this has to be done before I even touch your website, honestly.
It's true.
If you don't know what you're going to put on it, this is a waste of time.
It's true. No, I totally agree, and I think that as a developer, I've definitely been in one of those spots where it's like, hey, I've coded you, your 6 custom post types and your 15 taxonomies, but somehow none of that is relevant, and now I have to start all over and redefine things and change stuff around. So it's not a good spot to be in either. So that's it for today. Thank you guys for joining us, and anyone who's watching, we'll see you guys next week.